This financial literacy series is meant to supply and develop the knowledge and skills to an individual to make informed and effective decisions with all their financial resources. This week, we will be discussing spending and budgeting with Nicole Knight. Nicole Knight is an accomplished accountant with over 20 years of progressive and diverse accounting and finance experience in both the public and private sector. In her current role as the Chief Operating and Accounting Officer of Internal Private Bank, IPB, Ms. Knight develops organizational policies, manages the firm's strategic vision, overall financial stability, sustainability, and asset management of the company, and oversees human capital incentives, including recruitment, retention, and labor relations. Ms. Knight's impressive career began as a senior accountant at Computer Services Corporation, a government contracting firm in Virginia. Despite it being her first job out of college, Knight was given tremendous responsibility, including supervision of 7-person staff. Her astute accounting skills soon landed her a role at Deloitte, one of the top 4 accounting firms in the country. A native of the US Virgin Islands, in 2003, Ms. Knight accepted a comptroller position in her homeland so she could contribute more to community development. Since then, she has served in progressively higher roles, including senior financial analyst, chief of staff, and chief financial officer. Ms. Knight is passionately dedicated to improving her island home and cultivating the next generation of USVI leaders. She manages IPB's philanthropic and community engagement initiatives across the Virgin Islands, mentors high school students, and has taught as an adjunct professor at the University of the Virgin Islands. Ms. Knight is a certified public accountant and holds a Bachelor's of Science in Accounting from Howard University, as well as a Master's in Science in Taxation from American University, and is ABA certified in BSA and AML compliance. Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Knight.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Alex. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone else that's on the call today. I want to first start by saying thank you to the Rotary Club for inviting me to present today on spending and budgeting. As echoed by Christiana Williams, last week's presenter on savings and banks, what you guys are offering with this financial literacy series, is something that is much needed now more than ever in light of COVID and unfortunate impact on our economy. Those that know me well would be able to tell you just how passionate I am about this particular topic, and the fact that it's paved the foundation for me succeeding both personally and professionally throughout the years, and I'm happy to be sharing with you today. So, let's jump in. I'm gonna put a PowerPoint up just so you can have a visual as I'm kind of walking through these points. For many people, anything having to do with finances can seem like this unsolvable Rubik's Cube, and it's usually high anxiety provoking for most, at least those that I've come in contact with over the years. Sometimes I take for granted the fact that I work in this space, and so sometimes it comes a little bit easier to me, but a lot of people are intimidated by anything having to do with finances. The frustration and anxiety can lead to millions of us living and being shackled with debt every day, which is a huge problem throughout the US. And although in more recent years, the importance of good financial literacy has become sort of the new it thing, there's still a lot of us out there who didn't learn at a young age the value of understanding spending and budgeting. So first off, there's nothing that we'll be talking about here today that I have not learned and experienced for myself. I want to say kudos to all of you who showed up here today and are participating in other parts of the series. You're taking the time, shows your commitment in investing in yourself to learn and improve upon something that really, in this day and age, I think should be a standard throughout one's entire educational career. I'm gonna jump in to the slide. So let me know if you guys are able to see this, if I can tee this up properly.
And just a note as she gets us started, if you have any questions, please make a note of them. And when she finishes her presentation, we will have a question and answer session at the end. So please hold your question, make notes of them. And then either myself or Secretary Annika will host the question and answer session at the end, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so what are we gonna talk about today? I just kind of have some bulleted high-level objectives of some of the things that I wanted to cover with you guys. One, starting with what is a budget? What are the benefits of making a budget? Setting some financial goals for your budget. Developing good spending habits as part of the process. Learning how to pay off debt, which is usually one of the main reasons that you find people even thinking or delving into this space of budgeting and saving for the future. And then what are some of the tools that one can use if they're looking to start their budgeting journey, is what I'll call it. So what exactly is a budget? A budget is an estimation of income and expenses over a specified future period of time and is usually compiled and re-evaluated on a periodic basis, right? Some keywords there is a budget is, made up of income, it's made up of expenses, and it's usually over a period of time. Budgets can be made for a person, a group of people, a business, a government, or just about anything else that makes and spends money. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm just going to be focusing on individual budgeting for this exercise. What's the main purpose of having a budget? So since budgeting allows you to create a spending plan for your money, it ensures you always have enough money to do the things that you need and the things that are really important to you. Sometimes you have things that you really want to get into, and you feel like you might be able to do it, but you really are not able to, whether or not that is the case. So a budget, putting together a budget really helps you to kind of translate that thought process into something that's tangible that you can look at and see and help you along that journey. What are some of the benefits, you might ask, of making up a budget? Well, there are a few that I'd like us to focus on. These are things that I don't think folks think about, but like I said previously, one of the things that most people are attempting to do when you see them delving into this area of budgeting and figuring out what it is, a lot of times they're trying to get rid of debt. That's one of the areas that they're focused on. And having a budget can really help with being able to see a path forward in getting some of that debt off of the plate. For those that are not familiar, debt is essentially money that is owed from one person to another or from one person to a company. And many people, like I said, struggle with this burden of debt. One of the studies I recently read reported that 80% of Americans are in debt, and that median range for that debt is $68,000. which is, that is a lot of money, and can lead to a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. Some examples of other debt items of what things could be considered debt would be mortgages, credit card bills, medical bills, personal loans, car loans. There's a whole slew of things that can accumulate over time without you even realizing that, gets you in a position of having a tremendous amount of debt on your plate and not really knowing how to, not to move forward. One of the other great benefits of being able to make a budget is being able to generate savings. That's one of the things that I know a lot of people talk about wanting to be able to do, and sometimes for their situation they just can't see that path forward. And how do you save for a rainy day? Things come up unexpectedly. I think the time that we're in with COVID-19 is a true testament to why, savings of any kind is something that, if you have the ability to do it and you can discipline yourself in that way, savings is something that we should all have on the forefront of our everyday life. It really can help to reduce a lot of undue stress and burden that comes our way. And that leads to the other benefit of making a budget, which is the ability to reduce stress and anxiety. When a person is weighted down with their financial situation, it can cause a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. Stress and anxiety, as we know, can make it very hard for people, some people, to function in life. And it can be debilitating for some, and so stressful that it actually causes real health issues, high blood pressure, depression, heart attacks, substance abuse. So, this whole idea of budgeting really kind of touches in all these different areas of our lives. Another big item or benefit of making a budget is being able to lessen family conflict. As we know, not only can debt or financial strain push you and have a negative impact on your physical health, but it can also have a negative impact on your relationships as well. When you're stressed out, that always has a way of leaking into your relationship with family and friends. The major cause of divorce in America is related to financial issues. So this whole idea of being financially well really impacts all these different areas of our lives. So I move on. So what are some of the things that you might want to consider when making a budget? A budget, like I mentioned earlier, it's a personal tool. It's tailor-made for each individual, each person's circumstance. What works for some people may not work for others. Your budget can depend on your income, your goals, your expenses, and there are some basic items to contemplate before creating a budget. I'm gonna walk through what each of those components are. So one of the big elements to really being able to build and manage a budget is really being able to understand your income. For some, this may be easy. and others it may be a little bit harder. um, Oftentimes people have this tendency, whether they're doing it consciously or not, to live beyond their means. You know, everywhere you go, there are credit cards and loans available to help you sink even further to financial ruin. And you know, I've heard stories of and seen, you know, credit card offers, for example, with, you know, interest rates north of 25%. And there are people that actually take those loans out, and those companies are able to prey on those people for a very long time. If you are able to understand your income, then layering in the budget helps you to understand how you're able to live within your means. And you can climb yourself out of debt. Your income consists of money that you and your spouse make each month for your job, right? If it could also consist of any side work or home business that is involved in. When considering your income, one of the things you really want to do is you want to consider what your consistent income is. That is one of the key pieces to being able to build a budget and being able to manage the budget. The consistent income is what's pivotal. If you have a side business and, you know, it doesn't consistently earn a certain amounts of money, then, you know, you just want to include that. You don't want to include that in your budget, but if those funds do come available at some point in time, then you can have those go towards your savings and, you know, paying down debt and, you know, any other type of items that you might be wanting to address as part of building out your budget. The other component of the budgeting process is really being able to determine what your budget duration looks like. You can make your budget as simple or as complex as you want. You could create a budget for a year, you could create a sub-duration pay period or pay month. A budget duration could a budget duration could also be determined by your goal, right? And so you work backwards from the goal in order to understand what your duration will look like. So for example, if you want to go on vacation in February 2021, you essentially, and you want to start that process today, you essentially set what your duration is for this budget plan that you're going to put in place. The most common budget durations are usually a yearly budget, and they're usually broken into monthly periods. One of the things that examples I can give is of my own personal experience in really wanting to have a handle on what my expenses and finances were going to look like after graduating from college. You know, I said, well, I'm going out into the real world now and I really need to get a handle on this. And, you know, I personally was one of those that fell victim to the whole getting bogged down with credit cards, whether it be, you know, the MasterCards, whether it be store cards. One of the things that these companies do when young, impressionable folks go off to college is that they set these desks up all over the campus, and you know, you can't get from point A to point B without being offered a credit card. And unfortunately for me, I was one of those individuals that got sucked into that. And so by the time I graduated college, I had tons of debt, whether it be credit cards, whether it be store cards. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm getting ready to graduate. I need to put my big girl pants on. And I really wanted to be purposeful about the fact that I knew my student loans were coming due as well. And so I took it upon myself to build out a budget for myself. And at the time, I don't even really knew if I knew what I was doing. I just knew I needed something to help me get a handle on what the ins and outs of my funds. And so that was one of my first experiences with kind of building a budget that was specific to the needs that I had in place, which was to pay off my credit card debt and set myself up to be in a place where I can pay my student loans off without having any negative impact on my credit report. And I did that for many years. And so the things that I'm talking to you about are things that I have done for myself. I won't even tell you how long I maintained that spreadsheet for. It was a very long time. But really what that did for me was it really just kind of instilled this habit in me that became automatic, where I didn't need the crutch of having the spreadsheet to plug and play every single movement of my finances. And so now I don't necessarily manage that spreadsheet today, and I manage it for a long time. But if there's a special project that I want to get into, I'm not above whipping out a spreadsheet and plugging some numbers in order to really figure out, because thinking you have the money to do something and actually putting it on paper to see where the numbers fall out, those can be two completely different conclusions. And so, you know, another example I give is, for me, I'm looking to put, you know, with WAPA doing what it's doing, I'm looking to put solar panels on my house. And so I think I can afford it, but then I start to put the numbers on the paper and I'm like, well, maybe I need to wait a little bit. Maybe I can't get them right now. Maybe I get them in 6 months. So, you know, this stuff really works if it's something that's important to you. It's and you are not, you don't get intimidated by the idea of managing, you know, your finances and budgets and stuff. We can all do this stuff. It's really about the time and attention that you want to give to really expanding your knowledge base. So I'll jump back in. I'll jump back in here. Enough about me. One of the another very important element of being able to budget is really determining your expenses. You know, I personally think that this is the most important component of building building a budget, and it kind of goes to the example that I just gave. You know, seeing this stuff on paper and really understanding what those costs are, it really will make or break any budget that you're trying to be successful at. You know, you can build a great budget, but if your expenses are not accounted for, it will be a wasted effort. There are two categories of expenses. There are your fixed expenses, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. And then there are your fluctuating expenses. And so, you know, fixed expenses are expenses that are, you know, utility costs. You know that that's going to be your phone bill. It's going to be the same every month. WAPA, not so much, but utility nonetheless. In the VI, WAPA would not be considered a fixed cost bill, unfortunately. You've got your housing costs, which is your mortgage. Usually you know what that mortgage expense is going to be every month, so you're able to plug that in as one of those fixed costs. When determining your expenses, you want to include things also like your medical costs, your transportation costs. Take time to write things down. I find that gives you a completely different view of the world when you actually take pen to paper. It's something, and you know, or you know, put your hand on the keyboard. You know, we're in the electronic world now, but you know, you just kind of need to see things and be able to really assess what the impact is going to be to your budget. And lastly, last element of budgeting would be to track what is being spent. So even though you may think you know what you're spending, sometimes it might be just a really good exercise for like maybe 30 days to literally write down everything that you spend. I kind of do this now, not from a budgeting perspective, but from an ease of understanding where my funds are going. So I have a very set and fast rule where I have one credit card, and that's the only credit card that I use for anything that needs to be charged, because I'm able to get a summary by category at the end of each year from, if you have a really good credit card company, they should be able to provide you with these types of reports, or you can log into those reports online, and you can extract out the data and you can sort and play around with figuring out, what's what as far as your spend. And then there's just one bank account I use for things that are cash related. And so that's just me. I use one credit card. I don't accumulate credit card debt. One of the things that I've implemented for myself, and I'll just share with you, is that I do not spend more on a credit card in a month that I am not able to pay off in full before the credit card period, before the credit card bill comes. Okay, and then there's a couple of reasons why I do this, and I'll get back to the presentation, but I really wanted to share this with you. For one, if you pay your credit card bill before the cycle rolls forward, that expense or those charges never see your credit report. Okay, and we haven't touched on that really, but the idea of paying down debt has a positive impact on one's credit score. So you really gotta form that relationship as it relates to debt, as it relates to your credit report, and then really understanding what the impact is for those things throughout the rest of your life. Whether it is you want to buy a car and you need to take out a loan, whether or not you want to buy a new home, whether you want to refinance a new home. Those things are very important, and a budget or implementing the discipline of keeping a budget can really help you on your path to those things. Okay. So last element of budgeting is really to track what's being spent. Moving on. I think I talked about some of these already, what some of our fixed costs would look like versus fluctuating costs. Fluctuating costs would be those costs that are things like food, clothing, toiletries, obviously entertainment expenses, which I don't think anybody's doing a whole lot of anymore when living in this COVID world, but hopefully folks are saving that money. So those are some of the expenses that would fluctuate if you are maintaining a budget, and it's good to kind of get an idea of what those things would look like. All right. So now that we've got the elements of what it means to make up a budget, you have the ability now to establish a goal, right? It's important that you have a goal or goals in mind when you start your budget. Your goal can be simply to not have any of your utilities turned off due to non-payment. We don't want to be in that situation. Or your goals can be more complex. An example of a more complex goal would be, pay your utilities on time so your credit score improves enough for you to get a car loan, right? So you see how one little thing might impact something big or important that you would want to do down the road. It's all connected, or I should say, it all catches up to you at some point if you're not being very careful about establishing what it is exactly you want to do. Your goals can be short-term or long-term. And short-term goals are those that you can achieve obviously fairly quickly. And long-term goals are the ones that can be achieved over a period of time. Additionally, sometimes your short-term, you can have a lot of short-term goals that ultimately get you to your long-term goals, right? And sometimes it may be more manageable for folks. The long-term goal may seem so overwhelming that you think you could never get there. What you can do is you can break it down into small short-term goals so that you can see yourself having some success, and then that will ultimately get you to what it is you want to do in the long term. Okay. Lastly, be realistic. Making a budget means taking a real look at your spending. You can use your budget to cut some of your frivolous purchases that might be you might be making in haste. And we've all been there. I know I've been there a lot during COVID and playing around on the internet and having things keep constantly popping up. Those are the times when you need to exhibit the most discipline. So, we have temptations all around us, but if you have a budget, you have a goal in mind, take it from me. If you stay the course and you're realistic about what it is that you're trying to do, you can accomplish what it is that you set out to do as well. Okay. Let's see what else we have to get into. Should I do a time check? Hold on. I could talk about this stuff. Whoa, I could talk about this stuff a long time. It's 6:40 already. Hold on. Let me get a couple more slides in, and then I'll open it up for questions. I touched on this a little bit already, but paying off debt is one of the reasons you find that people really start to get into this whole idea of budgeting and getting their finances in control. Of budgeting is a wonderful tool to kind of get you to these other things. And so taking care of a debt, and I mentioned this before, helps with your credit score, which is something that unfortunately we just don't get that education about before it's too late. We've made huge strides. I mean, I think about when I started this to where we are now and having these types of seminars that are being offered, but it's one thing to have the seminars offered, but it's another thing if people don't even realize or understand that it's something that they need to learn about, right? So then you have that level of a disconnect. So I think these are principles that we need to start implementing at a very young age, starting in the home, and then starting in the schools. Unfortunately, this is not something that gets focused on unless it's kind of like an extracurricular activity, and a lot of people miss the boat on this. Okay. As far as the credit card hacks, I kind of spoke about that a little bit in another example, but some of the things that people do as far as getting rid of debt is they want to clean up their credit report. You also want to be able to maybe consolidate some loans. That's one of the things that I know I did when I graduated college. Was I fortunately needed a lot of money to go to school, and so by the time I got out, managing all those different student loan payments across the board was a lot. And so what I did was I worked towards consolidation, and so those are some things that that you can work on when you talk about getting rid of debt. We spoke about this a little bit earlier with regards to kind of one of the benefits of budgeting, which is, saving for the future. There are different types of savings. You have the ability to, if you are able to budget and contribute to, your different types of savings, you can save for rainy day, which is your kind of emergency fund. Day you have the ability to save for retirement. A lot of us have the ability to do that via our jobs. And, one of the things that I'd like to touch on as it relates to this in particular is bringing it back to this whole idea of folks living beyond their means. One other little tip, and again, I'm sharing just all the little things that happen to work out for me. So this isn't some stuff I read in a book. One of the things that I remember doing when I started work in my career was this whole idea of, for like maybe the first 10 years, of course we go in, we get our set salary, and then, if you're working for a good company, sometimes you'll get bonuses, sometimes you'll get raises. What most people do when they get those bonuses and when they get those raises is that they go out and they live and they increase their expenses to come right up against that extra income that they're making. One of the things that I did was for any raises or bonuses that I got, I pretty much pretended like I didn't get them, right? So I learned to live within the means. Even though I was earning more, I continued to live within the means that I had established when I was making less. And I found that has also been one of the things that really have contributed to me being able to save and to also invest in different areas. Another thing that I did as it relates to saving is I know people have heard this terminology before, which is the whole idea of paying yourself first. Excuse me. Pardon me. I'm gonna call it quits here in a second, guys. Let me get you this last one. One of the things that I did was opened up maybe 2 bank accounts that I had monies go into. And you might say, oh, well, what's the point of having no? What I did was I limited all access to these accounts. I didn't have any checks sent to me. I didn't have any debit cards sent to me. I don't even know how to get into these bank accounts online, right? But that, it's out of sight, out of mind. And that's really the concept that I was employing, which is to just pay myself first, get it into these accounts that I can't, fall back on as a crutch, and let that do what it did, and, continue to, of course, live within the budget that I'd set for myself for living expenses. Okay. I think I'm here towards like the last one. So there are many tools that you have available to you, especially in the tech world that we live in now. These are a few, and I'll provide this presentation if anybody, well, actually it will be recorded, but there are a lot of different tools that you can use that will help you to budget. If this is new to you, I would implore you to maybe just start very simple to kind of get the swing of things, and then maybe you can move on to one of these different types of modes for budgeting. And I will leave it at that and open it up for any questions.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for presenting.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, I went kind of long there, but okay.
I know you're fine. Just getting into it, giving us the tidbits and the tricks and everything.
Yeah,
so
I was giving you all the tips.
All the tips, all the tips. So we're going to open it up to question and answers. Is there anyone that has a question for Nicole? You can either raise your hand on the participant screen, or you can let me know in the chat. I know David has one for sure. He always has questions.
I'll let someone go first, and then I'll chime in. But Ms. Knight, great presentation. Thank you so much. but I'll go ahead and open up for questions, and Annika will kind of host that for now.
Mhm.
Okay, awesome. So Lisa, you can go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll get to Jada.
Good evening.
Hi,
Thank you, Ms.
Lisa.
Knight. How are you?
Good, thanks.
I have one question and then a comment.
Sure.
My question is, when it comes to credit cards, if you have two credit cards,
Mhm.
one with a low balance with a high interest rate, and one with a high balance with a moderate interest rate, what do you suggest that you do? Which one should you pay off first?
So we've got, tell
Low
me,
balance,
we got low balance,
high interest rate,
high interest rate.
high balance, moderate interest rate.
I would definitely get rid of high interest first. That's what I would do. And especially since it's a low balance, why not go ahead and just wipe it out and save those interest dollars and then move on to the next.
Okay. My other thing is I teach at the Career Tech Center,
Yep.
and I would like you to come and talk to my students, or virtually since I'm virtual.
Okay.
And we have a finance program.
Mhm.
And I also would like to request your assistance when it comes to mentoring some of our students,
Of course.
and to get them more involved, or even have a virtual tour of what you do on a given day or something. So we're looking to expand what they do and what they see, so that they can have other opportunities, and just say, I want to be an accountant. There's so many types of accountants you can be that they're not exposed to that.
Absolutely. That
So I'd
was
like
one of the
to-
things that, yeah, I was so blessed that I was able to be not purposefully exposed to, because, you know, you go and it's like, yeah, I want to be an accountant, but, you know, my career has put me so, what I do is so much more than accounting. You know, the accounting really just kind of set the foundation, all the things that I've been able to do. And to your point about really understanding what those different areas are, people need to tell you, you know, that you don't necessarily want to get boxed into any one area of accounting, because you do have people that unfortunately get boxed into certain categories of accounting without never being able to see the full spectrum and operate from that perspective.
Okay.
So I thank you for the invite, and I would be more than happy to support you on that endeavor.
Thank you. I'll let David know. Give me your information.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, perfect. Jada, you had a question?
She's typing.
Yes, I have a question. Hi,
Oh,
Ms.
she's
Knight. Thank
unmuting.
you.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for sharing your information with us.
Of course.
My question is, okay, so I had started off with a secured credit card. That's when you put your money down, and then
Yep.
they expand. My biggest problem was I would always pay everything off. Like, just like how you said, I would never spend the entire amount once I did get the credit approved. I just I would pay everything off, so nothing was making to the credit part as far as like building my credit. So I'm like, when is the perfect time are you supposed to make a payment?
Well, that's interesting. So it was secured, but
No, I had already reached the next level of it not being secured anymore.
Okay, but you would pay it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything.
So there's
instantly.
nothing wrong with, you would pay it off before the next before the cycle rolled. So let's say you spend $1,000 this month, right? And your bill rolls tomorrow. You would pay that 1,000 off today. So that 1,000 never got reflected on your credit report.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's what I did. That's the
Okay.
exact example that I gave. In the example that I gave of using one credit card so that I have a clear line of sight to everything I do in sort of my financial life, right? I never spend more on that card, because one of the of course the biggest pitfalls of the credit cards is that you spend 1,000, but they tell you to send them 25 every month, right? And so the more debt exposure that you have on your credit report. So for example, if your credit report is going to show you have $1,000 limit, but it shows you spent 900, that's a negative impact on your credit card because it's showing that you've used the majority of the debt that is available to you, right? So then when you go apply for a loan and the banks look at that debt to usage ratio, that's not what you want to have. So that you're doing exactly what I do, which is I spend during the month. I have a calendar reminder set that says my credit card bill is going to flip on this date. I need to go in 2 days before, open up my credit card statement, see what it is, pay it off. So that every time they send me my credit card bill, it is zero. So on my credit report, if it says I have 15,000 of credit, it also says I have 15,000 available. I haven't used any of it. And so the plus for that is depending on if you're trying to go secure, a loan, you don't have that ratio counting against you.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, perfect. We also have a question from Anselma. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Good evening, Nicole. Let me see if I can get this video started so that you can see who I am.
I can't hear you very well, whomever that is. I'm sorry. Kai Nielsen?
Or was that Anselma?
It's Anselma.
Oh.
You hear me better now?
Nope. A little bit better.
That's better.
Okay, a little bit better. Thank you so very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to definitely make sure that I'm there. I have actually been talking to my 14-year-old about the credit card stuff. So now I have two questions for you, actually. The first one is, I noticed you were talking about the credit card cycle and paying it off before. When my husband and I were younger, and we've been married for 26 years now, one of the things that we learned was you do not want to pay it off all at once because then that contributes to you having bad credit. Was that just a ploy from the credit card companies, or?
Well, I don't know if it would be a ploy because they want you to not pay it so that they can earn that interest. So I don't know if that would be a ploy from the credit card companies. I think it may depend on where you are in your credit history cycle, right? If you're new to credit and you need to establish that you can pay things timely on time, maybe that would be a good, that would be an instance where you're trying to build that you have a payment history of paying on time every time. For me, that doesn't work for where I am in my financial credit report history. Is something I find that maintaining lower balances so that you get dinged differently depending on the kind of debt you have on your credit report also, right? You got your credit card stuff, you got your student loan stuff, which is why I got my act together when I graduated college, because I heard that's the worst kind of debt you could mess up on, right? At least at the time, right? So they all kind of count against you a little bit differently. So for me, it's credit card debt is one of the ones that definitely ding you probably the most. A credit card debt will probably ding you differently than a personal loan or a mortgage, right? So it probably depends on kind of where you are in the cycle, but you don't have to do that for a long time to establish that you pay on time. It doesn't have to be a 2-year endeavor. I mean, I think a few months, you can kind of establish that pattern and have it be reflected on the credit report.
Okay. Thank you very much for that clarity. My second question is, I've been hearing a lot about this student loan forgiveness and what have you. How does that work, and where do you get the information on that?
You know, usually you can call your student loan company. As far as the forgiveness stuff, I don't have a lot of information on it because I don't fall in the category of where my student loans would be forgiven. But my sister, who is a vet, she was remarkably, she sent me a snapshot of this. They forgave all of her student loan debt, and it was in the six figures. So
Wow.
I mean, I couldn't even believe it. And so there are programs out there depending, you know, I'm not a vet, so I didn't benefit from that, but you know, she absolutely deserved to benefit, to be able to benefit from that for serving, right? So, you know, generally, if you are able to call your loan company, especially now with unfortunately COVID, there's just so much information on these borrower websites that can kind of steer you in the right direction. And then, you know, if you think you fall within a certain class category, you know, maybe a quick Google search would also help. But I don't have any specifics other than, because it really actually sometimes varies from lender to lender.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great. Hi, evening, everyone. Ms. Knight, thank you so much for the diligence you exuded tonight. It was awesome.
Who's
My
speaking?
question,
I can't even,
hey,
who's speaking?
Kai Nelson.
Oh, hi,
I'm here
hi.
fighting mosquitoes. If you see a dude with hair fighting mosquitoes, that's me. Nice.
Okay.
Yeah, my question, so I was able to avoid like the credit card schemes and all those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I realized kind of coming into the was a lot of people have a very negative perception of taking out loans, even if they're like low interest loans. So for example, the territory, we're considered rural. So most of our farmers could get these really kind of like huge USDA loans for very cheap. But they've kind of demonized that process. So what are you a proponent of? If you have the money, you've been really good at budgeting, you have all this money set aside.
That's a very good question, Kai.
So tell me, where do you lie? Where do you lie?
In my business, we never spend a dime of our own money.
Okay, so talk to us about that. We need to hear more about that.
Okay, if we can borrow at 2% and invest and earn 10, that's what you do. That's my business. That's the business I'm in, right? And so, you know, by virtue of all the things I've seen throughout my career, I've also taken away some of those things and implemented them in my personal financial journey. So, you know, I can't tell you which way is the right way or the wrong way. It's really your philosophy on how you see the world, how you view the world, right? If you have $100 that you can put into an investment and make 20%, right? And you can borrow at 2%, right? You've made that money back, right? You've made money because you've earned, you were able to get 100 from someone and pay them 2%, but you put your 100 to work for you at 20, right? So you've earned $20 in interest and you pay $2 in interest expense. So you're ahead. So, you know, this is kind of like getting into like financial, you know, financial advice. So I don't want to necessarily go down that road, but I'll tell you boldly what I do, okay? I am a borrower. I borrow and then I put my money to work for me. That's just what I do. That's not to say I'm I don't use my own money for different things. I do, but it depends. It really depends on the scenario, depends on the situation.
Right. So like long story short, you're not going to take your savings to do a down payment if the bank is going to be a line of credit.
If you can make more money on that savings than it would cost you to pay on that loan, just at a very high level, because there's so many things that we would have to peel under, but at a very high level based on the scenario you gave, for me, if I could earn more than I'm spending, I'm going to take the earn more.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you so much for your answers, Ms. Knight. Have a good night.
You're very welcome.
Bye-bye.
Perfect. I do have one question from a participant. The question is, would you recommend closing a credit card with a zero balance to reduce the number of credit cards you have?
I don't necessarily know if that would be a positive impact, because when you close that credit card, what you're doing is, let's say you have 4 credit cards, right? They each have $1,000 on it. So and let's say each of them have, the first 3 have 500 that is being reported as being spent on the card, right? So your credit report is going to show you got $4,000 of available credit, but only $1,500 that's being used, right? If you now close that credit card with that, that has the zero balance, but you have the 1,000 available, right? Now that ratio has just gone up, because now you've got 1,500 against just 3,000, right? So that usage ratio of your overall debt has now gone up because you've eliminated a credit card. What I will say is that there's some very interesting credit monitoring apps that will allow you to run different scenarios. You know, it'll say, hey, you say, hey, if I paid this down by this amount, what could be, they'll run different scenarios. So, based on the example you just gave me, I don't know, depending on what you're trying to do, if that'll necessarily have a positive impact on your credit report.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you would run the scenario.
I'm sorry?
I said, so you just run the scenario using the
Yeah, you could run a scenario. So it depends on what you're using your credit report to do. Are you using it to show that you are credit worthy and people have extended you credit, or you using it to show that you don't have a lot of credit cards? I mean, it could very well just depend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know the credit score game. I mean, we can have a whole session on this. We probably will in the future, but I'm going to turn it back over to David so he can ask one more question, and then we're going to close out.
Okay. Good evening, Ms. Knight. Thank you again. 2 quick questions. You touched a little bit about debt and so forth, and actually talked quite a bit about it. My question: what, in your opinion, is the difference between good debt and bad debt? Because you hear that about that sometimes. So, what's your characteristics of each one, and when would you use each one?
Yeah, very, very interesting. I have such a different philosophy just over the course of my career. And I don't want to get into financial advice-y type things. I can just give you, I don't think there's anything, if you're doing what you're supposed to do with your debt, I don't think it's necessarily bad debt. If I had not incurred the level of debt, and I got debt, right? But when you compare that to the assets that I have, right, I would not have been able to accumulate those assets without incurring that debt. So again, I don't want to, I'm not telling anybody to go out and get a whole bunch of debt. Debt is a good thing if you know how to manage it. And that's where the whole budgeting piece comes in. That's just one tool that'll teach you how to develop that relationship with money, with finances, right? The reason debt exists is because somebody's benefiting from it, right? It's not necessarily all a bad, it's not necessarily all a bad thing if you know how to make it work for you. So that's a whole other conversation. So a nutshell, based on my philosophy and for where I am in my financial life, I don't necessarily see debt as bad debt if you are managing it in the way that it's meant to be managed.
Okay, so you would basically say good debt would be debt that you take on in order to accumulate additional assets.
Yeah, in a nutshell, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then final question is, can we talk to somebody where we can find where you can lead me to someplace where I can get a 20% return? I'd be very interested
Yeah.
with you whenever you're
That's the kind of
available.
advice we need. That's what we're looking for.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I like that. That's why Annika and I's jobs are so stressful, okay?
I could imagine. All right.
Right.
And then
That
as we get ready to close out, I know Annika will close out in a minute, but just as a final key takeaway, what's the final message you like to share with our audience and so forth as kind of a wrap up, as a capstone to your presentation this evening, the final takeaway for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, what I will say is that I start by saying the things I speak about are the things I didn't know what these things. I wouldn't have been able to have this discussion with anybody 20 something years ago. So, you know, it's like I said, the idea that the folks are here and they're really wanting to expound their knowledge in the financial space, because this is a financial series and not just necessarily budgets. It's going to take time. Don't feel overwhelmed by learning and trying to figure out what these concepts are. And, you know, once you are able to really delve in and understand what they are, and again, it's going to take time, there really is some wonderful benefits to being able to get more intimate with your finances. I know a lot of people try to be at arm's length with their finances, but finances can learning and knowing finances can be a great thing. And it doesn't have to be anywhere on the level that I'm doing it at, but any little bit helps. So I think that's kind of where I'll leave it, is just take your time. You're already on the right path, and you'll get there.
Thank you. Okay. Real quick, thank you, Ms. Knight, once again. Thank you to our audience. Just as a reminder, our series or session next week will be on taxes, and that'll be led by Ms. Naomi Maynard Julian, who is a tax professional at IRB. So you'll get all the inside scoops on how to deal with your taxes and what to look out for. Annika, would you like to close us out?
Yeah, sure. Again, Nicole, thank you so much for the presentation. You have a wealth of knowledge to offer, and I'm really glad that you were able to volunteer your time towards this. So we're just going to end with the 4-way test, which is something that we Rotarians say at every meeting, just to remind us of why we're here and what we do. So it goes up the things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? And with that, everyone have a great evening, and be sure to register for our other sessions.